Racist cop Tases black girl. Not knowing her father, is the police captain, a tense encounter spirals out of control when an officer chooses the wrong target. Her father's rank ensures this incident won't be swept under the rug. And if you cherish your family and love stories like this, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and avoid 10 years of bad luck. The fluorescent lights of the police locker room cast harsh shadows as Jake Thompson adjusted his newly issued bulletproof vest. His hands trembled slightly while securing the straps, a detail he hoped his training officer wouldn't notice. At 23, Jake was the youngest officer in the precinct, and tonight marked his first solo patrol in the Bradford district, an area known for its complex racial dynamics and rising tensions. Officer Martinez, Jake's training supervisor, approached with measured steps. "Thompson, remember what we discussed. Your equipment is your lifeline." Martinez methodically checked Jake's gear: radio, flashlight, handcuffs, and the department-issued taser. "But your judgment is your most important tool. Every decision you make out there carries weight." The briefing room buzzed with the usual pre-shift activities. Veterans exchanged information about recent incidents while newer officers reviewed protocols. Jake absorbed the atmosphere, noting how the senior officers carried themselves with a confident yet cautious demeanor. The shift sergeant outlined areas of concern, emphasizing recent reports of drug-related activities in the warehouse district. Across town, in the brightly lit art studio of Bradford Community College, Maya Johnson cleaned her paintbrushes, her mind already visualizing the mural she planned for her final project. The studio walls displayed her previous works, bold pieces addressing social justice and community unity. At 20, Maya had already established herself as a promising artist, earning recognition for her ability to capture complex social issues through her art. Professor Chen approached Maya's workstation, examining her latest sketch. "Your technique is evolving, Maya. This piece could be powerful." The sketch showed hands of different colors intertwined, reaching toward a shared future. Maya explained her vision for the mural, describing how she planned to incorporate actual community stories into the design. As the evening progressed, Maya stayed late to complete her project proposal. The art building gradually emptied, leaving her alone with her thoughts and creativity. She texted her father, Captain Samuel Johnson, letting him know she'd be heading home soon. The familiar ping of his reply provided comfort. "Be careful, sweetheart. Call if you need anything." Meanwhile, Jake began his patrol route, hyper-aware of every shadow and movement. The training scenarios played through his mind as he scanned the streets. Martinez's words echoed. "Trust your instincts, but never let fear make decisions for you." The radio crackled with routine updates, each transmission causing Jake to tense slightly. The incident occurred at 11:42 p.m. Jake was patrolling the area near the college when he noticed movement in the poorly lit alley between the art building and the student center. Department protocols regarding suspicious activity flashed through his mind. The figure appeared to be handling something near the wall, possibly a weapon, possibly spray paint. His mind raced through the possibilities. Jake's hand moved to his equipment belt as he called out, "Police, show me your hands." The figure turned quickly, startled by his command. In the dim light, Jake couldn't clearly see the person's face, but their sudden movement triggered his trained responses. The next few seconds seemed to stretch into hours. Maya, surprised by the sudden confrontation, instinctively clutched her art portfolio closer. The portfolio fell, spilling sketches across the ground. Jake, interpreting the sudden movement and the falling objects as potent eel threats, made the split-second decision that would change multiple lives. His hand moved to his taser. The sound of the taser deploying broke the night silence. Maya's body crumpled to the ground, her sketches scattering in the wind. As Jake approached, the reality of the situation became horrifyingly clear. Under the beam of his flashlight, he recognized not a threat, but a young art student, and more significantly, the daughter of Captain Johnson. The radio call that followed was terse and professional, but Jake's voice betrayed the gravity of what had just occurred. "Dispatch, officer needs medical assistance at Bradford College, East Alley. Subject down after taser deployment." Even as he followed procedures, securing the scene and checking Maya's vital signs, Jake knew that this night would mark a turning point, not just for him, but for the entire community. Within minutes of the incident, social media platforms erupted with shaky cell phone footage captured by a student leaving the library. The video showed Maya lying motionless on the ground while Jake radioed for help, his hands visibly shaking as he checked her pulse. The caption read, "Breaking. Police tase unarmed art student at Bradford College. Student identified as daughter of police Captain Johnson. Hashtag Justice for Maya." The emergency room at Bradford Memorial Hospital quickly became a focal point of tension. Medical staff worked efficiently, treating Maya for the taser's effects while dealing with an increasingly crowded waiting room. News vans began appearing outside, their satellite dishes stretching into the night sky like metal trees. Samuel Johnson's arrival at the hospital created a ripple effect through the gathered crowd. His usual commanding presence was replaced by something raw and vulnerable. He wore civilian clothes, having rushed from his home, but his authority was unmistakable. The crowd parted as he strode through the emergency room doors, his face a mask of contained fury and fear. "Where is my daughter?" His voice carried across the waiting room, causing conversations to halt. A young nurse quickly approached, leading him to Maya's room. As he disappeared behind the swinging doors, whispers resumed with renewed intensity. Back at the police station, Jake sat in the debriefing room, his uniform still perfectly pressed, but his composure crumbling. Internal affairs investigators had already been notified, and the preliminary paperwork sprawled across the table before him. His fellow officers passed by the room's glass walls, some avoiding eye contact while others stared openly. Officer Martinez paced in the hallway outside, engaged in a heated phone conversation with the police union representative. "No, you listen to me. This kid needs protection, but he also needs to understand the gravity of what just happened. This isn't just any civilian we're talking about." In the break room, a group of officers gathered around the small television mounted on the wall. Local news was already running the story on repeat. Breaking news tonight as protests begin forming outside Bradford Memorial Hospital, where Maya Johnson, daughter of police Captain Samuel Johnson, is being treated after being tossed by a rookie officer in what appears to be a case of mistaken identity. Officer Sarah Chun, a 10-year veteran, slammed her coffee cup down. "This is exactly what we've been warning about in training. Split-second decisions without proper assessment." Across the table, Officer Mike Rodriguez shook his head. "You weren't there, Chun. Any one of us could have made the same call in that alley." The debate grew heated as more officers joined in. "Did you see the social media posts? They're calling it another example of systemic bias. The kid was following protocol. Protocol doesn't matter when you tase a captain's daughter." The arguments bounced off the break room walls, each comment further dividing the room. Meanwhile, Maya's phone, recovered from the scene, continued buzzing with notifications. Her art school classmates had already organized an impromptu vigil outside the hospital. Student groups from across campus were mobilizing, sharing the video, and demanding answers. The hashtag Justice for Maya began trending locally, then nationally. Samuel Johnson stood by his daughter's hospital bed, watching the monitors while scrolling through the mounting social media storm on his phone. His years of experience in law enforcement had taught him to remain calm in crisis situations, but this was different. This was personal. His daughter, his position, his department, everything he had worked for was suddenly colliding in a perfect storm of controversy. The hospital's security team reported growing crowds outside. Signs were appearing. "Art is not a crime, and who do we call when police are the danger?" Local community leaders began arriving, requesting meetings with Captain Johnson. The hospital administration scrambled to maintain order while protecting patient privacy. As midnight turned to early morning, the incident had already transformed from a singular event into a catalyst for long-simmering tensions. Jake remained in the debriefing room, now accompanied by his union representative and a department psychologist. His initial report used phrases like suspected threatening movement and followed protocol, but his hands shook as he typed. The night shift commander called an emergency meeting with all available supervisors. "This situation is going to get worse before it gets better," he announced to the assembled officers. "We need to prepare for protests, media scrutiny, and internal investigation. Every officer needs to understand, one incident one decision can ignite a powder keg. Outside the hospital, the crowd continued to grow. Maya's art school friends had begun creating impromptu murals on permitted surfaces nearby, turning the gathering into both a protest and an art installation. The images they created spoke of pain, justice, and the need for change. Local news crews captured every new edition, broadcasting the evolving story to an increasingly engaged audience. Maya's hospital room transformed into an unexpected command center of activism. Despite her physical discomfort, she sat propped up in bed, her laptop illuminating her determined face as she typed. Her social media posts were measured but powerful. "I am not just the daughter of a police captain. I am not just an art student. I am a voice that will not be silenced by fear or force." Hashtag reform not revenge. Her friends from the art department filtered in and out, bringing art supplies and helping her document her experience. Maya began sketching her perspective of that night, creating stark black and white drawings that captured the moment of terror when she faced the officer in the alley. These images, shared online, resonated deeply with her growing following. "It's not about revenge," Maya explained to a close friend who was filming her statement. "It's about recognition. Recognition that these mistakes keep happening to people who look like me, regardless of their status or station." Her words, clear and unwavering, spread quickly across social media platforms. Meanwhile, at the police headquarters, Samuel Johnson faced his own crucible. The conference room was packed with community leaders, fellow officers, and city officials. The tension was palpable as Samuel stood at the head of the table, his uniform pristine, but his eyes revealing sleepless nights. "We cannot ignore the larger implications of this incident," he stated, his voice steady despite the emotional turmoil beneath. "But we also cannot allow it to divide us further." Some of his colleagues shifted uncomfortably in their seats. They had known Samuel for years, respected him, but this situation tested loyalties and challenged long-held beliefs. One of the community leaders, Reverend Marcus Williams, spoke up. "Captain, we appreciate our position, but your daughter's experience highlights exactly what we've been protesting about. How many other Maya Johnsons are out there without a captain for a father?" The meeting continued for hours, with proposals ranging from immediate policy changes to comprehensive departmental reviews. Samuel maintained his composure, but each suggestion, each criticism, felt like a personal blow. His daughter's pain and his department's reputation hung in precarious balance. Across town, Jake Thompson sat in his mentor's living room. Sergeant David Chun, a 20-year veteran who had taken Jake under his wing during training, listened as the young officer poured out his fears and regrets. "I keep replaying it in my mind," Jake confessed, his coffee growing cold in his untouched cup. "Every decision, every second. Was I too quick to react? Did I let preconceptions cloud my judgment?" Chun listened silently, letting Jake process his thoughts. Finally, Chun spoke. "The hardest part of wearing the badge isn't the physical danger, Jake. It's facing the consequences of our actions, especially when we make mistakes." He leaned forward, his expression serious. "What matters now is what you do next." The conversation was interrupted by Jake's phone buzzing with notifications. Another protest was forming downtown, and social media was filled with debates about police training and racial bias. Jake's name wasn't public yet, but he knew it was only a matter of time. Maya's online presence continued to grow. Her artistic response to the incident, a series of powerful sketches and digital artworks, gained attention from national media. She began receiving messages from other victims of police misconduct, each sharing their stories and expressing solidarity. "Your art speaks truth to power," one message read. "It shows what we've all felt but couldn't express." Maya's hospital room became a hub of creativity and activism, with her father watching silently from the doorway, witnessing his daughter's transformation from victim to advocate. Samuel spent his evenings divided between the hospital and his office, reviewing police training procedures and incident reports. The weight of his dual role, father and captain, showed in the deepening lines around his eyes. His wife found him one night, surrounded by policy documents and Maya's artwork, trying to bridge the gap between his two worlds. Jake, following Chin's advice, began documenting his own experience, not for public consumption, but for personal reflection. His writing revealed a young man grappling with the reality of power, privilege, and responsibility. "I joined to protect and serve," he wrote. "Now I have to ask myself, protect whom? Serve what?" As the week progressed, the incident sparked broader discussions about police reform, racial profiling, and community relations. Maya's art and activism, Jake's internal struggle, and Samuel's complex position became symbols of a larger societal conversation. The city held its breath, watching these three lives intersect and transform, while community tensions continued to simmer beneath the surface of everyday life. The stage was set for either meaningful change or deeper division, and everyone involved knew their next moves would be crucial. The streets of Bradford took on a new energy as protesters gathered daily, their numbers growing steadily. Maya's artwork became the visual language of the movement. Her hospital sketches were transformed into protest signs, t-shirts, and social media avatars. The image of hands raised in both surrender and defiance, drawn from her hospital bed, became particularly iconic. Local news crews maintained a constant presence outside the police headquarters, their cameras capturing the steady stream of community members arriving to file formal complaints about past incidents. The spotlight on Maya's case had opened floodgates of similar stories, each one adding pressure to an already strained system. Widening documented 27 similar incidents in the past year alone, announced civil rights attorney Rachel Martinez at a press conference on the courthouse steps. Maya Johnson's case isn't unique. It's just the one that finally got attention. Behind her, a wall of protesters held up Maya's artworks, now enlarged into protest banners. Samuel Johnson's morning briefings became increasingly tense affairs. Officers reported growing hostility during routine patrols, with citizens filming every interaction on their phones. The atmosphere in the precinct was thick with uncertainty and defensive anger. "We can't do our jobs if we're second-guessing every move," complained Officer Turner during one such briefing. "But we also can't ignore what happened," countered Officer Rodriguez. Samuel watched these exchanges with a heavy heart, knowing each word reflected deeper divisions within his force. The pressure mounted when the city council called an emergency session to address police reform. Samuel was required to attend, leaving his daughter's hospital room for the first time in days. The council chambers were packed, with overflow crowds watching on screens outside. Meanwhile, Jake faced his own crucible. Assigned to desk duty pending investigation, he watched through windows as protesters marched past the precinct. Some carried signs with his name, his face. His identity had leaked despite department efforts to maintain privacy. During one particularly large protest, Jake was processing paperwork when a chant rose from the street. "No more fear. No more doubt. Train them better. Weed them out." Each word seemed to pierce the building's walls, finding him at his desk. Maya's influence continued to grow. From her hospital room, now decorated with hundreds of supportive letters and artwork from around the country, she coordinated with student activists and community organizers. Her social media presence became a rallying point for national discussions about police reform. "It's not enough to just talk about change," she said in a widely shared video post. "We need to see it, feel it, and most importantly, demand it." Her words were accompanied by a time-lapse video of her creating a new piece, a mural design showing community members and police officers working together, with shadows of past conflicts behind them. Samuel found himself increasingly torn between his roles. During a particularly heated community meeting, he removed his captain's badge before speaking. "I stand before you not as a police captain, but as a father whose daughter was harmed by the very system I've served for 20 years, he began. The room fell silent. The city's political landscape shifted rapidly. Reform proposals that had languished in committees for years suddenly found urgent support. The mayor's office announced a comprehensive review of police training and use of force policies, citing Maya's case as a catalyst. Local businesses began taking sides. Some displayed "Back the Blue" signs, while others showcased Maya's artwork and offered their spaces for community meetings. The city's divisions became physically visible in its storefronts and public spaces. Jake's patrol car, parked in the station lot, became a symbol of the controversy. Each morning, he found it either covered in supportive notes from fellow officers or critical messages from protesters who managed to reach it overnight. The dual nature of the response mirrored his own internal conflict. As pressure mounted, the department announced new training protocols and community oversight measures. But for many, including Maya and her growing following, these changes felt like band-aids on a deeper wound. Real change, Maya wrote in a statement released through her growing network of supporters, requires more than new policies. It requires a fundamental shift in how we view power, protection, and community. Her words resonated far beyond Bradford city limits, drawing national media attention and support from civil rights organizations. The city seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see how this pressure would ultimately reshape its institutions and community relationships. The story of a single night in a dark alley had evolved into a movement that demanded answers to long-ignored questions about justice, accountability, and change. Maya's hospital release coincided with her first major public art installation, a temporary mural spanning the hospital's permitted exterior wall. Despite her father's concerns about her public visibility, she stood before a crowd of supporters, her arms still sore from the taser's impact, and unveiled her work. The mural depicted a series of interconnected scenes: a dark alley transformed into a garden, police badges blooming into flowers, and hands of different colors reaching through barriers. Most striking was the central image, a mirror-like surface where viewers could see their own reflections alongside painted figures in uniform. Art doesn't just show us what happened. Maya addressed the gathered crowd, her voice steady. It shows us what could happen instead. News cameras captured the moment as she dipped her brush in paint and invited community members to add their own marks to designated areas of the mural, transforming it into a collaborative piece. Among the attendees was Marcus Rivera, a young activist known for his work in documenting police interactions. He approached Maya after her speech, camera hanging around his neck. "Your artwork speaks to exactly what we've been trying to say for years," he said. "But you found a way to make people really see it." Their conversation extended into the evening at a nearby cafe, where Marcus shared his extensive documentation of police encounters in Bradford's minority neighborhoods. Maya's artistic perspective combined with his statistical evidence created a powerful narrative that neither could have achieved alone. "We need to show both the numbers and the human story," Maya explained, sketching ideas on cafe napkins. "People respond to different languages. Some need data, others need imagery." Marcus nodded, already envisioning how to merge their approaches. Meanwhile, the art department at Bradford College had become an unofficial headquarters for the reform movement. Students and faculty worked alongside community members, creating posters, banners, and multimedia presentations that would be used in upcoming demonstrations. Professor Chun, Maya's art mentor, provided guidance while ensuring the movement maintained its creative focus. "Art has always been a catalyst for social change," she reminded her students. "But it must speak truth, not just anger." During this time, Jake continued his mandated desk duty, increasingly aware of the artistic representations of that night appearing around the city. Walking to work, he passed walls covered with wheat-pasted posters showing Maya's interpretations of their encounter. Each image forced him to confront his actions from new angles. One installation particularly affected him: a series of life-size silhouettes with taser marks illuminated in phosphorescent paint. The figures were neither accusatory nor forgiving, simply present, demanding acknowledgement. Jake found himself returning to view them at night, when the glowing marks seemed to pulse with uncomfortable truth. The movement gained unexpected allies. Local gallery owners offered their spaces for exhibitions focusing on police-community relations. Theater groups developed performances based on interviews with both officers and citizens affected by police actions. The arts community had found its role in the conversation about justice. Maya and Marcus's collaboration proved particularly effective. They created an interactive installation where visitors could experience both perspectives of police encounters, civilian and officer, through art and documented footage. The exhibition drew crowds from neighboring cities and attracted national media attention. It's about building bridges of understanding, Maya explained to a documentary crew filming the exhibition. We can't move forward if we're stuck in our separate experiences. Her words were backed by powerful imagery, a wall of mirrors fractured by lines that, when viewed from the right angle, formed a complete picture. The art movement spread beyond traditional venues. City bus stops displayed student artwork addressing police reform. Construction site barriers became canvases for approved murals showing community healing. Even some police officers contributed anonymously to the artistic dialogue, sharing their own struggles with power and responsibility. Maya's following grew beyond social justice activists to include artists and educators nationwide. She received invitations to speak at galleries and universities, expanding her message while staying focused on local change. Her father watched this transformation with a mixture of pride and concern, knowing that increased visibility brought both opportunities and risks. Local businesses, initially hesitant to take sides, began displaying artwork from the movement in their windows. The visual landscape of Bradford shifted, reflecting the community's engagement with questions of justice and reform. Even those who disagreed with the movement's message couldn't ignore its creative impact. As the art movement gained momentum, it provided a new language for discussing difficult topics. People who might never attend a protest found themselves engaging with the issues through exhibitions and installations. The conversation about police reform had found an accessible entry point through creativity and shared expression. In a cramped conference room at police headquarters, Samuel Johnson faced his fellow command staff, his usual composure tested by what lay before him. Spread across the table were case files, dozens of them, each documenting incidents similar to what happened to Maya, but lacking her advantages of visibility and connection. These weren't priority investigations, Samuel stated, his voice tight with controlled anger. Some weren't investigated at all. He shared his family's history. His grandfather, a civil rights activist who faced police brutality in the 1960s. His father, who joined the force believing change could come from within. The room fell silent as Samuel continued. I became a cop because I believed in justice. I rose through the ranks thinking I could make a difference. But my own daughter had to become a victim before I truly saw what was happening in our department. His words hung heavy in the air, challenging years of institutional inertia. Meanwhile, Maya discovered a pattern while reviewing community submissions for her next art installation. Multiple stories mentioned Officer Richard Collins, who had retired 3 years ago. His name appeared repeatedly in accounts of excessive force, particularly in minority neighborhoods, but formal complaints had mysteriously disappeared. Look at this. Maya showed Marcus the compiled testimonies. Collins was Jake's training officer for his first 2 weeks. They began connecting dots, revealing a pattern of institutional protection that extended beyond individual incidents. The revelation shook Maya. Her art took on a darker edge, incorporating redacted documents and broken chains of command into her designs. One piece, titled Protected and Served, featured a wall of badges that, when viewed from different angles, transformed into covered eyes. Jake, still on desk duty, overheard veterans discussing Collins. He knew how to handle things, one officer remarked nostalgically. Never had a complaint stick. The conversation made Jake uncomfortable, remembering Collins's casual comments about maintaining control in certain neighborhoods. During his mandated counseling sessions, Jake began to unpack these influences. Collins told me the most important thing was going home alive, he confessed to the department psychologist. He said hesitation gets officers killed. But now I wonder if that fear itself is what makes us dangerous. Maya's investigation gained momentum. Her art studio became an unofficial repository for community stories, each one adding detail to a larger picture of systemic issues. She created a massive installation piece, a timeline of incidents stretching back decades, interwoven with personal narratives and official responses. Samuel, reviewing Maya's findings, recognized names and incidents he'd dismissed earlier in his career. The weight of his past decisions pressed against his conscience. In a private moment with his daughter, he shared his own struggles with racial identity within the force. "I thought staying quiet about certain things made me a better leader," he admitted. "I convinced myself small compromises served a greater good." Maya recorded his testimony, later incorporating it into a powerful audiovisual piece about complicity and awakening. Jake's encounter with Maya's latest exhibition forced him to confront his own biases. The installation included training materials from Collins's era, annotated with real incident reports. Jake recognized the language, the subtle conditioning that had shaped his reactions that night in the alley. The revelations extended beyond the police department. City council members, judicial officials, and police union representatives found themselves implicated in the pattern of overlooked complaints and buried reports. Maya's artistic presentation of these connections made them impossible to ignore. Local journalist Elena Rodriguez began publishing a series of articles connecting Maya's findings to broader patterns across multiple jurisdictions. The story expanded beyond Bradford, revealing similar practices in neighboring departments. "This isn't just about one night or one officer," Maya explained during a community forum. "It's about a system that teaches fear, rewards aggression, and buries its mistakes." Her words were illustrated by a new piece, a garden of paper flowers, each petal containing a testimony, growing through cracks in a replica police badge. The impact of these revelations rippled through the department. Younger officers began speaking out about troubling training practices. Veterans found themselves defending past actions, or, in some cases, finally acknowledging long-held doubts. Samuel faced increasing pressure from both sides, those resisting change and those demanding it. His personal connection to the case made him both uniquely qualified and potentially compromised in leading reform efforts. Each decision carried the weight of his family's history and his daughter's future. Jake discovered that his experience with Collins wasn't unique. Other rookie officers shared similar stories of being taught to prioritize control over communication, force over understanding. These conversations led to difficult questions about how fear and power shape police culture. As the truth about past incidents emerged, Bradford's community grappled with its role in allowing such patterns to persist. Maya's art forced viewers to confront their own silent complicity, while offering hope for conscious change. The Bradford Community Center's main hall, usually reserved for local celebrations, transformed into an arena of tension. The emergency community meeting drew hundreds, with overflow crowds watching live streams in adjacent rooms. Security was tight, with both uniformed and plainclothes officers present, their unease visible despite professional demeanors. Maya sat in the front row, her sketchbook open on her lap, documenting the scene in quick, precise strokes. Samuel stood at the podium, his captain's uniform pressed, but his shoulders carrying visible weight. Jake occupied a seat near the middle, out of uniform, attempting to blend into the crowd despite the occasional recognizing glance. "We're here tonight," the moderator began, "to address the events that have divided our city and to find a path forward." The microphone carried her voice across the packed room, but whispered conversations continued, creating an undercurrent of tension. Samuel spoke first, his years of command experience evident in his measured tone. "I stand before you wearing two badges tonight, one on my chest and one in my heart as a father." He paused, making eye contact with Maya. "Both demand honesty. Both demand action." He proceeded to outline the department's historical failures, acknowledging the recently uncovered pattern of buried complaints. The crowd's reaction shifted between murmurs of vindication and gasps of shock as he named specific incidents, dates, and officers previously protected from scrutiny. When Jake took the podium, the room fell silent. "I joined the force to protect and serve," he began, his voice initially uncertain but gaining strength. "But that night in the alley, I didn't protect anyone. I served only my own fear." His admission hung in the air, raw and honest. The community response was immediate and heated. A local reverend stood up. "Fear? Try being black in this city. Try teaching your children how to survive a police encounter." Others joined in, years of frustration pouring out in waves of testimony. Maya watched Jake's face as community members shared their stories. Her pencil moved across paper, capturing the moment his professional facade cracked under the weight of their words. Her sketch caught the exact instant recognition replaced defensiveness in his expression. The meeting reached a crescendo when Mrs. Thompson, an elderly resident, approached the microphone. "I've lived here 60 years, she declared. Seen promises made and broken. What makes this time different?" Her question cut through the rhetoric, demanding real answers. Samuel stepped forward again, removing his badge and placing it on the podium. "Because this time," he said, "we're not just promising change. We're admitting our part in the problem." The gesture silenced the room. Even the news cameras stopped whirring for a moment. Jake stood next, moved by Samuel's action. "I can't undo what happened that night." He addressed Maya directly for the first time in public. "But I can help ensure it never happens again." His voice cracked slightly. "I'm willing to learn, to change, to be part of the solution." The tension in the room shifted. While some remained skeptical, others began sharing constructive suggestions for reform. Maya's sketches captured this transformation. Faces moving from anger to cautious hope, hands raised in protest becoming hands extended in dialogue. Community leaders presented specific demands: civilian oversight boards, mandatory de-escalation training, transparent complaint processes. Samuel and Jake's vulnerabilities had opened a door for real negotiation. As the meeting progressed into its third hour, exhaustion set in, but people stayed. This wasn't just another town hall. It was a watershed moment for Bradford. Maya's continuous sketching documented each crucial moment, each shift in the room's emotional temperature. When the moderator finally called for closing statements, Maya requested to speak. She walked to the podium, her sketchbook in hand. "I've been drawing all of you tonight," she said, holding up her work. "Every face tells the same story. We're all tired of living in fear. Fear of each other, fear of change, fear of truth." She turned to Jake and her father. "But tonight I've seen something else in your faces: courage. The courage to admit mistakes, to face anger, to change." Her words resonated through the hall, offering a blueprint for moving forward. The meeting ended not with resolution, but with commitment. Task forces were formed, combining police officers and community members. Working groups established to review training procedures. Oversight committees planned with real authority. As people filed UT into the night, Maya's sketches captured one final scene. Jake and Samuel, still in the hall, talking quietly with community members, their body language showing exhaustion, but also determination. The night had changed something fundamental in Bradford's dynamics. Local news would later call it the Night of Truth, but Maya's artwork captured what words couldn't. The moment a city began to heal, one difficult conversation at a time. The corner cafe where Maya and Jake first agreed to meet seemed neutral ground. Neither police territory nor protest space. Maya arrived early, setting up her sketchbook as both comfort and shield. Jake entered in civilian clothes, his usual confidence replaced by careful humility. "I keep replaying that night," Jake began, his coffee untouched. "Not just the moment with the taser, but everything leading up to it. Every assumption I made." Maya's pencil moved across paper as he spoke, capturing his struggle to find words. Their initial conversation was awkward, punctuated by long silences and unfinished sentences. But as minutes stretched into hours, something shifted. Maya shared her artwork depicting the incident, while Jake described the fear and training that drove his actions. "Fear isn't an excuse," he acknowledged, studying one of her sketches, "but understanding it might help prevent another incident." Maya nodded, adding notes to her drawing's margins. Fear, both sides, different contexts, same emotion. Meanwhile, Samuel worked to implement changes within the department. He established regular meetings between officers and community members, not just for complaints, but for dialogue. The sessions were difficult, often confrontational, but gradually producing results. "We're seeing a 30% decrease in use of force incidents," Samuel reported during a staff meeting. "Officers who participate in community dialogue programs show significantly better judgment in high-stress situations." Some veteran officers remained skeptical, but others began to see the value. Maya and Jake's conversations became weekly occurrences. They visited locations of previous police incidents, with Maya documenting through art and Jake providing law enforcement perspective. Their discussions attracted others, community members, officers, activists, all contributing to a growing dialogue. It's not about forgetting what happened, Maya explained to a group of art students documenting their meetings. It's about understanding why it happened and preventing it from happening again. Her new series of artworks reflected this evolution, showing paired perspectives of each incident they discussed. Samuel watched this developing relationship with complex emotions. During a quiet moment in his office, he confided to his wife, "Seeing them work together, it gives me hope. But it also reminds me of everything I should have done differently." A breakthrough came during one of Maya and Jake's discussions about police training. Jake described a scenario from his academy days, and Maya immediately began sketching alternative approaches. Together, they developed a visual training module incorporating both officer safety and community perspective. "What if we could show recruits both sides simultaneously?" Maya suggested, spreading her drawings across the cafe table. "Help them see the whole picture before they're in a crisis situation." Jake's police experience combined with her artistic vision created something innovative. Their collaboration caught the attention of police academies in neighboring cities. Samuel arranged for Maya and Jake to present their training materials to a group of instructors. The response was cautiously positive, with several departments requesting pilot programs. However, not everyone supported this growing partnership. Some of Maya's more radical supporters accused her of selling out to the system. Meanwhile, Jake faced criticism from officers who felt he was betraying the force. Both had to navigate these pressures while maintaining their commitment to change. During one tense moment, when negative comments appeared under Maya's latest social media post, Jake surprised her by publicly defending their work together. "Real change requires understanding on both sides," he wrote. "Maya taught me that courage sometimes means admitting you were wrong." Samuel's position evolved as well. At a regional police chiefs conference, he presented data showing the positive impact of the new community engagement programs. "We're not just reducing incidents," he explained. "We're building trust. That makes everyone safer, citizens and officers alike." Maya and Jake's influence spread beyond Bradford. They were invited to speak at community forums in other cities experiencing similar tensions. Their story of confrontation transformed into collaboration offered hope to communities struggling with police-community relations. The cafe where they met became symbolic of their work, a neutral space where difficult conversations could happen safely. Other officers and community members began holding their own dialogue sessions there, each contributing to the growing network of understanding. As their one-month anniversary of regular meetings approached, Maya created a special piece, a diptych showing their first tense encounter alongside a recent conversation, connected by threads of gold running through both scenes. "Sometimes," she wrote beneath it, "the hardest conversations lead to the most important changes." As dawn broke over Bradford, the city awakened to an unprecedented sight. Thousands of people, far more than any previous demonstration, converged on Central Park. Maya's latest art installation, a massive temporary memorial listing names of victims of police misconduct nationwide, served as the backdrop for what would become a defining moment in the reform movement. The protest, carefully planned over weeks, incorporated elements that set it apart from typical demonstrations. Art installations dotted the park, each telling a story of both tragedy and hope. Large screens displayed real-time statistics alongside body cam footage from positive police community interactions. The atmosphere balanced grievance with possibility. Maya stood on the makeshift stage, her presence both powerful and vulnerable. "We're not here to tear down," she addressed the crowd, her voice carrying across the park. "We're here to rebuild, to show what police-community relationships could look like." National news cameras captured every word, broadcasting live across the country. Jake's decision to attend in civilian clothes created a stir among his fellow officers. Some viewed it as betrayal, others as courage. He positioned himself neither with the police line nor the protesters, but in the space between, a physical representation of his journey from that night in the alley. Samuel arrived in full uniform, a deliberate choice that sparked immediate discussion on social media. As he made his way through the crowd, people parted, creating a path that symbolized the division his presence represented. But when he reached the stage, he did something unexpected. "I speak now not just as a captain," he began, removing his badge, "but as someone who has seen both sides of this divide. Someone who has failed and learned. Someone who has hurt and healed." His words, unscripted and raw, silenced the massive gathering. The protest featured innovative elements that Maya had designed. At scheduled intervals, the crowd participated in perspective exercises, role-playing scenarios that put civilians in officers' positions, and vice versa. The activities, though sometimes uncomfortable, created moments of genuine understanding. National civil rights leaders who attended praised the approach. "This isn't just another protest," noted Dr. Angela Wright, a prominent activist. "This is a blueprint for sustainable change." Her endorsement brought additional media attention and legitimacy to the movement. As the day progressed, something remarkable happened. Officers watching the protest began removing their riot gear. Some joined the perspective exercises. Others engaged in conversations with protesters. The rigid lines between law enforcement and civilians began to blur. Maya's father watched this transformation from the stage, his expression a mix of pride and amazement. When Jake approached him during a break in the speeches, their handshake became one of the day's most photographed moments. The veteran captain and the officer who had tossed his daughter, united in the cause of reform. The protest's impact reverberated beyond Bradford. Police departments nationwide requested information about the community engagement programs Maya and Jake had helped develop. Reform activists studied the protest organization as a model for effective demonstration. Maya's speech reached its crescendo as sunset approached. "Change isn't just possible," she declared, gesture encompassing the diverse crowd. "It's happening right here, right now. We are writing a new chapter in how communities and police interact." The crowd's response was electric. When she invited both officers and civilians to join her in creating a collaborative art piece, a massive mural depicting their shared vision for the future. The resulting image became a powerful symbol of possibility. Jake's participation in the mural painting, alongside community members who had initially demanded his resignation, demonstrated the distance everyone had traveled. His strokes added blue to the sky of their shared vision, while others contributed their own colors and shapes. As night fell, the protest transformed into a vigil. Thousands of lights illuminated the park, each representing a commitment to change. The memorial wall, now covered in personal messages and promises, glowed with hope rather than just remembrance. Samuel's closing remarks captured the day's significance. "Today, Bradford shows the nation that change begins with courage. The courage to admit mistakes, to forgive, to learn, and to grow together." His words, carried live on national news, sparked similar gatherings in cities across the country. The protest ended not with confrontation, but with conversation. Small groups lingered in the park, officers and civilians sharing stories and contact information. Maya's art had created a space for dialogue that extended beyond the day's events. As the crowds dispersed, Maya, Jake, and Samuel stood together near the memorial wall. Their unlikely alliance, forged through conflict and determination, had helped catalyze a national conversation about police reform. The next phase of their work was just beginning. The discovery came through an unlikely source. A junior IT specialist, routinely upgrading the department's database, stumbled upon encrypted files dating back 15 years. What he found would shake the Bradford Police Department to its core. Maya was the first to receive the tip, delivered anonymously to her art studio. A USB drive containing evidence of a systematic cover-up orchestrated by former senior officer James Collins, Jake's initial training officer, and a network of high-ranking officials, including the father of Officer Michael Reynolds, a current police commissioner. The files revealed a pattern. Instances of police misconduct deliberately misclassified, evidence tampered with, complaints buried. Collins had been the architect, but Commissioner Reynolds' father, former Chief Reynolds, had provided the protection and influence needed to maintain the system. "This goes deeper than we imagined," Maya told Jake during an emergency meeting at their usual cafe. Jake's face paled as he reviewed the documents, recognizing training scenarios that Collins had taught him. Scenarios designed to justify excessive force through carefully worded reports. Samuel, when presented with the evidence, sat in his office for Ho.R.S., reviewing years of incidents he dismissed as isolated cases. The weight of his unintentional complicity pressed heavily on his shoulders. "I should have seen it," he whispered to his empty office. "I should have questioned more." The investigation moved quickly once Maya shared the files with trusted journalists. Elena Rodriguez, who had been covering the reform movement, worked tirelessly to verify each document, each connection, each buried complaint. Her research revealed a network extending beyond Bradford, implicating officials in neighboring departments. Jake faced his most difficult decision. As Collins's former trainee, he possessed crucial insight into the corruption's methodology. His testimony could provide the human context needed to understand how the system perpetuated itself through fear and manipulation. "They taught us to see threats everywhere," Jake testified before an emergency council session. "But the real threat was what they were turning us into." His voice shook, but remained steady as he detailed Collins's training methods, the subtle indoctrination, the creation of an us versus them mentality. The revelation sparked immediate action. Commissioner Reynolds resigned in disgrace. Internal Affairs launched a comprehensive review of all cases handled during Collins's tenure. Samuel, with the support of reform advocates, was appointed to lead a special task force investigating systemic corruption. Maya transformed the evidence into a powerful artistic statement. Her exhibition, hidden in plain sight, combined official documents with portraits of affected community members, creating a devastating narrative of institutional failure and human cost. The gallery opening attracted national media attention. The community's response surprised everyone. Instead of erupting in anger, Bradford's citizens channeled their outrage into organized action. Maya's art space became a center for constructive reform planning, where officers and civilians worked together to design new oversight mechanisms. Jake's role evolved from witness to active reformer. His understanding of both the corrupt system and the path to change made him invaluable in developing new training protocols. "We have to teach officers to see humanity first," he explained to a group of academy instructors. "Fear can't be our primary training tool." Samuel faced his greatest challenge: rebuilding trust while acknowledging the department's failures. His public statement became a model for police accountability. "We cannot change the past, but we can ensure its darkest chapters are never repeated." Every buried complaint represented a betrayal of our oath to serve and protect. The final piece fell into place when Collins himself was arrested, attempting to flee the country. His interrogation revealed the full scope of the corruption, including previously unknown incidents of misconduct and cover-ups. The system he had helped build began to crumble. Maya's last artwork of the crisis depicted three figures: a young officer, a police captain, and an artist, standing together on broken ground, reaching toward a rising sun. Beneath it, she wrote, "Truth breaks before it heals. Healing begins when we face our truths together." The story of Bradford's transformation spread nationwide. Other departments began examining their own histories, their own training methods, their own hidden files. The movement that started with a single incident in a dark alley had exposed a national crisis of conscience. Jake, Maya, and Samuel found themselves at the forefront of a larger movement for police reform. Their unlikely alliance, forged through conflict and strengthened by truth, offered hope for other communities struggling with similar challenges. As Bradford began its long journey toward genuine reform, the three of them stood together at Maya's final exhibition of the year. The gallery walls told their story, from confrontation to revelation, from pain to healing, from division to unity. It was both an ending and a beginning, a reminder that real change starts with facing difficult truths and finding the courage to create something better together.